Hey guys, Church Safety guy James here, and I wanted to do a video on, I guess this would be a part 2 on the video that I posted yesterday on VBS tips and tricks to share some best practices with you all, and certainly give you some hints to make your Vacation Bible School, or really any event, a little bit better and more thought out. And I know a lot of times events in churches can really kind of put us in a place where we want things to be better, but we don't necessarily understand the dynamics of how to make them better and how to approach maybe other ministries or church leadership or other folks that we would be doing that event with. And so I wanted to get into that, but first, if you don't know who I am, that's absolutely fine. I am the executive director of the Churchsafetyguys. Our website is ChurchSafetyguys.com, and our mission is to help churches with safety and security, among other things, but primarily safety and security with an emphasis on ministry mindset and having a ministry first approach to church safety and security. So if we can help your ministry, oftentimes we reverse engineer different tools. And so we a lot of times will create tools. So if for some reason you need help with a particular topic, please feel free to reach out to us. We are a charitable organization in the state of Ohio and nonprofit. But again, we don't make a salary or income from anything that we receive, and we cover expenses, and that's pretty much it from that. So but we have resources out there. There's certainly resources that I've written and put together. You can see a active list of those on our website at churchsafetyguys.com. We're all over social media. We have groups and communities that you can join to talk to others in similar positions such as yourself. And then we have a broadcast on Sunday night and a podcast, and we also have the industry first Churchsecurity app. So there's tons of resources down there. You're welcome. With the Churchsecurity app, you're welcome to download that because that has some great resources, and that's free. Thanks to our sponsors and thanks to the folks that support our ministry, which I will do a quick shout out for 2A Radio Center. Billy Dubenmeyer over there does a fantastic job helping churches, and is also very much ministry focused. So they're a big sponsor of us and a big supporter to help us get content and resources out to you guys. So if you have any communication needs, radio needs, feel free to reach out to them. All right, so I wanted to expound just a little bit on, if you watch the first part of the tips and tricks to VBS video that I created yesterday, I wanted to expound a little bit on the proactive and reactive approach. We had a few people reach out to us, and I'm always grateful for the encouragement when folks reach out and say, hey, we're going to share this video with our team. We appreciate what you're talking about. There's some good content in there. Could you expound on this, or could you talk a little bit deeper on this as well? So thinking about it, and I apologize if it seems like I'm reading off screen. I'm not. I've got about a page and a half of notes, because in my mind during the day, I just randomly write notes down about when I'm thinking about topics. And last night, yesterday after I worked, I went to my old church and helped them with Vacation Bible School. And so I got home kind of late last night, but had all these notes in my mind and had to get them down on paper before I forgot them. So anyhow, so this applies to Vacation Bible School. It really applies to any event that you're doing, and in some ways could also apply to churches that maybe your church leadership really isn't on board with, or maybe another ministry. Say your church leadership is on board with having a safety team and a safety ministry, but you're finding a little bit of friction between safety and maybe the children's ministry or First Impressions or any other ministry that you need to work with. So I mentioned yesterday in the video reactive and proactive. Having a proactive or reactive approach. And let me tell you what those are in my mind when I'm talking about that. So proactive would be trying to establish guidelines beforehand, before the event, before something happens. You're actively going and talking to someone else. Now, this can be multi-leveled. If you're listening to this and you're a safety director or leader, that could be you talking to another ministry leader, could be you talking to a pastor. If you are just a regular volunteer, there's no such thing as just a regular volunteer. But if you're a volunteer without leadership functions, you can use this to talk to your leaders if you want to communicate better with them and talk to them about some things that maybe are bothering you, or things that, okay, well, I approached this once, but I'm not getting any traction on this, so let's try a different approach, right? So here's an interesting thing. So we have to be focused, and this is a biblical concept on Jesus's ministry while he was on the earth, but we have to be focused on also taking a step back and thinking, if something's not going the way that we think it should or we want it to, sometimes it's not the people around us, sometimes it's us and how we're approaching this situation. And so the reason I mention that is because sometimes we need to consider being a better leader ourselves, or a better volunteer ourselves, or working on ourselves, instead of jumping in and automatically assuming that there's a problem that needs to be fixed or changed, something that needs to be changed. So you'll hear me say oftentimes, not everything is a problem that requires a hammer. That tool is a great tool. It has certainly has its function and purpose, but not every problem requires us to use that tool the same way, right? So we should always be willing to invest effort into ourselves as far as understanding someone else's perspective. And you'll hear me talk about that a little bit later on. But we should always be, in any discussion, we should always be listening to someone else and willing to adjust and compromise and work with someone and be flexible. Sometimes people call that political, like, hey, I work well engaging with others, but at the same time, it is a skill set, and a lot of times it crosses over with de-escalation, because how you speak to someone, whether you speak, whether you listen, whether you have a perspective of tone and everything else, really comes down to de-escalation and what are you trying to accomplish. So proactive and reactive. So proactive would be beforehand, before something, and reactive is really after an incident happens within that event or during that event. So and I'll use Vacation Bible School as the example, right? Because that's what we're talking about. That's the season that we're in, and that is really kind of where we're at as far as topic of content and ideology and all that great stuff. So we're talking about proactive, reactive. What is it trying to accomplish? What do we want to accomplish? So proactive would be going to maybe, and we'll assume that a children's ministry or hospitality ministry, we'll say the children's ministry is running VBS, and you are working with them, right? Because you're getting ready for this event at the church, and you want it to go as smoothly as possible and help them, but you don't want to create a disruption, and you want them to listen to you. So what I like to do is to have a proactive approach. I like to sit down, not on a Sunday, beforehand, maybe an hour, carve out an hour of time, sit down with the individual and say, can you run me through the script of everything that you, like your ideal situation, not mine. I'm trying to accomplish and help them accomplish the results that they want to accomplish the best way possible. I'm not there to make waves, okay? Now, the folks that know me personally, that I've worked with in ministry, know that oftentimes when I sit down, we've built a rapport enough where by the end of that conversation, they'll ask me, they'll say, what are your recommendations in this situation? Is there something we could change that you see that maybe I don't? Because oftentimes me personally, excuse me, I have the gift of being able to look at something as a whole globally and say, okay, if you're trying to accomplish this, then we need to adjust over here, and we need to make this over here work more efficiently and better so that we get your results. And that's what I'm about. You know, it's not, for me, safety and security with VBS or an event, it isn't about me creating a situation or creating an event to benefit me. It's about me contributing ideas and an operational component that will help them be successful. Okay. So, and that's important to remember, because again, it's not all about, it's about all of us being successful supporting the mission of the church. What's the mission of the church? Well, VBS is used as an outreach to the community. Fantastic, that's fine. But keep in mind that if we're doing that, then we're not just standing guard. We're not just saying, okay, no, I don't want to do it that way. That's stupid. Let's do it this way. What we're doing is we're trying to work within their parameters to make their event better and to benefit the church, but to also remove as much liability as possible, as much bad events happening as possible, and just make it a better event for everyone. So proactive, reactive. Proactive, I'd sit down, like I said, I'd sit down for an hour, I'd talk to them, and then typically at the end, or towards the end, if I understand how the process is, and I'll say, could I ask you a question? And oftentimes, like, the children's director will say, absolutely, what do you need? Okay, this is what you're trying to do. Can we tweak this a little bit? How much can we move this? Like, how flexible are you on this here? And oftentimes they'll say, well, you know, tell me what you have in mind. Okay, I see this. And that gives you the opportunity. Is this what you're expecting? Is this the procedure, policy, process that you're expecting? Is this the outcome you're expecting? Those are good things to kind of be flexible on and to keep in mind. Now, before you go and talk to someone, and I'll get into this in a second, you need to have a list of questions, or know a list of questions in your mind that you want to ask, of things to accomplish in that discussion. or in that meeting. And that applies to any event, not just VBS. But I will tell you, you have to know what you want. What is the intent? Is your intent to understand when you sit down and talk to that other ministry? Is your intent to understand how this fits into the big picture and how to make ministry better? Or is your intent to change something? Because sometimes the route to change something isn't always the route we think it is. Meaning, sometimes it's easier to ask questions and say, this is kind of my perspective, but I'm trying to understand your process of thinking. Could we tweak this a little bit? Could we make this better and easier for me to help you? And in a sense that, that helps us overall and helps the purpose. When I first started at my church with VBS, we, and I don't have time on this video, I don't have time for that story, but when I first started, the Cliff Notes version of it was the folks that were over VBS had a joking mindset about how many times we had to call an ambulance for VBS during the week, and that's kind of entertaining, is from the standpoint of it's kind of funny. Okay, things went that bad. How many times do we have to call them? Well, when they asked me to take over safety, my goal was, what? No, I want to have a team of folks that can respond to situations, but let's look at what happens beforehand. What can I do to be proactive to make sure that we're addressing concerns before we get to the point of calling an ambulance? Are there things that we can do to make our processes safer and better ahead of time? And sometimes you have to step back and kind of look at things and say, you know what, with a proactive or reactive, I am too reactive. And that's where self-evaluation comes in and ministry evaluation. Maybe I need to be more focused on what's going on before it happens than necessarily after or during. Now, reactive, after, and I mentioned this earlier, after an incident, during an event. So an incident would be like a child gets hurt in VBS, or, something happens. Now, all of a sudden, you're addressing everything going on based on that. So you do need to stop. If something happens, you do need to stop and look at that and say, okay, could this have been avoided? Is this something where maybe we couldn't avoid it? Could we tweak something to make it different, to be better? And kind of think through the dynamics of what happened and how it happened. A couple of years ago, for our game time, our VBS, our Vacation Bible School goes, I believe, from 6 to 12, ages 6 to 12. After 12, 13 to 18, we involve the teens and we involve the kids in serving. And oftentimes they'll serve with games. Well, a couple of years ago, we had one of those giant, 10-foot balls, and we had games going on, and a teen and an adult were waiting for kids to come out. They were messing around with the ball. One of the adult got smacked in the face. The teen ended up on the ground with a broken nose. And so it was just a crazy situation. And after the situation, now we responded medically, we responded to it. It was serious enough. We called 911. We had an ambulance respond, take him to the hospital for several reasons. But moving forward, afterwards, we looked at the whole thing, and we kind of looked at it after the incident as a reactive and said, okay, this happened. We weren't expecting it to happen. We were expecting, proactive would have been, we were expecting kids to get injured in games. So we had people there with equipment ready to respond. We addressed that. Reactive, okay, this incident happened. Why did this happen? We responded, but could we do something different next time that would not make that happen? And absolutely. We changed policies and parameters of teens being involved and teens doing stuff when VBS was going on and while we're waiting. And so we had to adjust our culture and how we approach that a little bit to make it better and to make sure that no one gets a broken nose or got hurt. So some questions I want to throw out there and wrap this up, but some questions that you can ask before you even go in and talk to somebody else that maybe they're a different ministry head, maybe they disagree with you, but some food for thought to kind of think through. I mentioned at the beginning I was going to give you guys some questions that you can think through and potentially ask when you're trying to be proactive. But it works with being reactive after an incident or after an event as well. So first question, what are you trying to accomplish? I'm not talking about the ministry. I'm talking about you personally. What are you trying to accomplish by talking to this other person about changing something? Okay. Think through your mind. And the reason that might sound silly, but the reason I say that is because oftentimes we'll go into a meeting and not have a purpose or a plan. And if you don't, then you're going to fail. That's just the reality of it, because you don't know what you want. You don't know what the end goal is. So how can you move in that direction if you don't know? Know what you're trying to accomplish and what you want before you go into that meeting, before you have that conversation. And that also will build and give you the information and the passion and the dedication to do what you need to do. So what's number two? What's the end result desired? You need to know, number one, you need to know what you want, but number two, you need to know what you're trying to accomplish from that discussion, that meeting. If you go into your church and your church leadership and you're like, hey, I want to have a safety team, that's great. What are you going to do with that? And I always think back to one of my favorite quotes is from Henry Ford. And Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. And so if we are going and we are expecting change and we're expecting something different, or we're going into, say, VBS, or we want to start a safety team, or whatever we're trying to accomplish, we need to have the end result desired in front of us so that we can easily say, this is what we're trying to do. This is the end goal. How do we get there? And sometimes the path and the road to getting there isn't always the way that we think it should be and the way that we think it should go. Sometimes it goes a different way. It's not always the straightest point from point A to point B to accomplish those results. But if you know what you want to accomplish, then when you go into that meeting, you can say, yes, I want to accomplish a safety team, a safety ministry that can support the ministry of the church, that can effectively respond and mitigate emergency incidents and incidents where someone might be threatened with, life. And you can go down the list, but you need to have that end result dialed in, okay? Is what you're asking reasonable? This is number 3. Is what you're asking reasonable? What's reasonable? That's a pretty subjective question. But if you go into a meeting, whether it's Vacation Bible School or just starting a safety team, if you go into a meeting and you're like, yep, I want $5,000, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, why aren't you giving this to me? This is what I need. I guarantee they're going to say no. So again, applying this to VBS, is what you're asking, is the change that you're asking reasonable for them to adjust and make that adjustment. I don't know, but if you go in with the attitude of being flexible and trying to be reasonable, then chances are you will walk away with better results and results closer to your end result desired, number 2. So number 3, is it reasonable? And then number 4, does it accomplish what's necessary or set an appropriate trajectory toward a better ministry? Again, you got to tie this back into overall. What is this globally doing to help the church? Is it making ministry better? And here's the reason why. Because Jesus was all about quality and not quantity. Jesus didn't want a bunch of people following him. He wasn't just about a bunch of people following him. He was about people following him that actually did a quality job, that were discipled, that understood principles and characteristics that he demonstrated as a teacher and as a leader. So when we look at it and we think, okay, is what I'm asking, is there multiple ways to accomplish what I'm asking and what I want to accomplish? There could be multiple ways. It doesn't always mean that there's going to be one way. But when you're discussing this with somebody and you're talking about it, think about this, like, that person is sitting there on the other side of the table and they're trying to put together ministry just like you are, and they're trying to run that ministry just like you are. So from the standpoint of the example that Jesus gave, he was engaging. He engaged with people to help them understand. So oftentimes, and I mentioned earlier, this overlaps with de-escalation. Oftentimes our tone sets how this meeting is going to go, or how this discussion is going to go in this ideology. So during a discussion, seek to listen and understand. And again, I think I said it in the first video that I did yesterday, but my focus would be to, in that discussion, would be to say, could you explain how you see this happening? Like talking to the ministry leader, the children's ministry director for VBS as an example. Tell me how in your best way this process would go. And then at the end, when they say, okay, what do you think? You don't have to have a semi truck and run that through to be like, well, this is what we should change and this is what. But if you're trying to change something or you're trying to make something different, having that open communication and asking first and listening and being able to say, I had this idea and I just wanted to run it by you. Maybe it's not a great idea. Maybe it is a great idea. I don't know. But it seems to me that if this is the way that we're doing things and this is what we want, maybe if we tweaked this area or did something different over here, this would be better. And this is why I think this way. So, again, opening with a question and asking a question, can you explain to me, oftentimes makes the situation a million times better than going in and saying, this isn't right, this needs to be changed, we need to be doing this. Help me help you. I'm passionate about us supporting the ministry of this church. I'm passionate about reaching kids. I'm passionate about being about outreach to the community. I'm passionate about that. Maybe there's a better way that we can do this. So tell me what your process and your thinking is, what you want to accomplish, and then give me the chance to maybe discuss this with you and come up with some reasonable solutions and ways that we can move forward to be better. Because at the end of the day, does it accomplish what's necessary or set an appropriate trajectory toward a better ministry? We all want to work together. We all want our ministries to be successful. We don't want a ministry to fail. And if we're looking holistically at, and I'm not talking about training or doing content within training. But if we're looking at it as what can we do to better this ministry, to better this impact, and be kingdom focused, it's really hard to argue with that. If I go in a meeting and I sit down with a pastor or I sit down with another ministry leader and I say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? And they say, blah, 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 this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And I say, could I make a suggestion just from what I've seen here? I've watched this. I've seen how you're doing things, and you just explained your mission to me. Could I make a suggestion to make this possibly a better ministry and more effective? If I could give you that information, would you be interested? And it's not a game show, but at the same time, you have an idea, there's value behind that idea, but 99.9% of your idea and the success of your idea comes back to how you present it to others and how you engage with them to present that idea to make things better. That idea could be good, it could be horrible, and it's okay if it's horrible. You have to be flexible and understand that not everyone is always going to agree with your ideas, and not everybody is always going to move forward with those ideas, and that's okay. The reality, though, is that if you want them to listen to your ideas, you have to present it in a way that you're supporting their mission, and it shouldn't just be you walking up to them and saying, well, we should change this. We should do this different. We should do it this way. We should do it. Your way isn't always the best way. And, as much as I like to look at things and analyze things, there are times when stuff that I recommend doesn't get passed on. There are times when I look at policies and procedures and say, hey, could we change this? Could we adjust this? Because this is crazy. This and the folks that I work with, thankfully, are gracious and know me. But there are times when we go through in a day and we're like, okay, the flow on this was just horrible and it wasn't safe. We've got to change this immediately. Can we change this? Can we do something different? Because again, we're all trying to do the same thing and all of our ministries overlap. So let's help each other be better and have better outcomes with that ministry. So again, thanks for listening. Appreciate you. I appreciate how you're serving the Lord in your community. And if there's ever anything that we can do, you can reach out to us through our website, which is ChurchSafetyguys.com. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for listening. Hopefully this way to communicate for VBS or really any event, my thoughts on this. Hopefully this is a blessing and a benefit to you and your team. And as I mentioned, if there's any way that I can help, or one of our folks could help moving forward, please reach out and let us know. Take care. God bless.